Hola a todos. Am I broadcasting? A ver, preparing. Okay, I'm broadcasting. This is Abelardo de la Peña Jr. with La Plaza de Cultura y Artes, welcoming you to En Casa con La Plaza. Today's a great event that we have with a couple of special guests. This is our 3-time weekly series of broadcasts from our home to your home. La Plaza de Cultura y Artes is still closed, along with a lot of other organizations, museums, institutions, bars, and so on. But we do the best we can in making it possible for you to enjoy the discussions, conversations, performances, and demonstrations that we normally have at La Plaza. Today, unfortunately, if you're following us on Facebook, you'll see a shaky camera. We weren't able to connect directly onto our Facebook stream. It's one of those days, but that's what happens sometimes. So we're going to go ahead and get started. I'm going to introduce to you our host for tonight, our host, Xavier Mejia from Q Radio. So please take it away, Javier.
Gracias, Abelardo. My guest today is Armando Ibañez, who is best known as the creator of Undocumented Tales, also known as Undocu-Tales. Armando is a Latinx queer filmmaker and activist from Acapulco, Guerrero, Mexico. His passion for film began at the age of 7 while watching 1950s Mexican cinema. Armando currently lives in Los Angeles and has been living in the United States for the past 20 years. Undocumented Tales is an episodic story on YouTube that shows how Fernando Gutierrez, a Mexican server living in Los Angeles, is consistently having to navigate his legal status as an undocumented immigrant, as well as his true identity as a gay man. Bienvenido, Armando. ¿Cómo te encuentras?
Bien, me encuentro muy bien. Gracias por, thank you so much for having me here. I'm so excited. And thank you everyone who's watching.
I'm glad we get to talk again. Let's start off with, what do you think is the reason that Undocumented Tales has touched so many people?
Oh, wow. I guess because we don't have a lot of projects like this, projects where we get to change the narrative that mainstream media had created about underrepresented communities. In this case, the undocumented LGBT community. There's not a lot of projects like this, and I feel like Hollywood has always been showing the struggles of undocumented immigrants, but they have never shown the other side, which is like undocumented people being resilient, people, like having joy, celebrating their life, their existence. And I think maybe that is one of the reasons why I feel like community have been supporting the project.
And I think that's a perfect segue to my next question, which is, I want to talk about green sauce and cilantro no bueno. So in the opening scene of Undocumented Tales, we see that the time was set for September 10, 2013, with Fernando working as a server at a Mexican restaurant. And while in the middle of taking an order, a white cis female customer who is played by Libby West hurries him to come over and take her order. When Fernando does come over, the audience quickly gains access to the patronizing behavior that he has to tolerate to keep his job. Let's talk about character development for a moment, and let's start with how you decided to write Fernando's character.
Well, since the beginning, one thing that I wanted to show is Fernando as someone who is not the typical good immigrant. And by saying this, is someone who works really hard and doesn't speak up what's in his mind, and someone who makes mistakes. And I think that when we see what he's thinking, specifically in that scene, I feel like I could show something different from him. And that was my main intention with the entire project the entire character for the lead character, Fernando, that he was not going to be just like the good immigrant, just he was going to be a human being, someone who just speaks up his mind.
I remember when I first saw cilantro, no bueno, and the expression that Libby is making. Have you had to experience that yourself? What inspired that specific moment?
Well, thank you for asking that, because as someone who has worked 20 years in the restaurant industry, yes, I feel like that exactly, that moment where she's like, cilantro no bueno, I feel like that's one of the thousands of examples that I can tell you about these little microaggressions or sometimes racism that people encounter in restaurants. I have worked with people that, you know, they don't, people of color that don't speak Spanish, and white people just assume that they speak Spanish because they work in a Mexican restaurant, and they talk to them in like, gracias amigo, thank you señor, and I have seen so many things in restaurants that I didn't know how to articulate them, but I know that they were not okay. So this is why I started writing about these experiences. So most of the things that you're gonna see in the restaurant scenes have come from real experiences that I have either experienced or witnessed in the restaurant industry.
Another scene in a restaurant, actually in the same episode, we're introduced to a character that's sort of short. He's played by Frederick Lopez, and speaking about characters that represent Latinos who don't speak English or are not necessarily speaking English in the show, where Frederick plays Edgar. There's a scene where Frederick and Fernando and Edgar are having a conversation at the end of their shift, and the conversation moves to tipping at the end of the night. And Edgar states that he didn't make as much money in tips as Fernando because he was given the Mexican customers, while suggesting that Fernando pays the host to give him the white customers, introducing the idea that Mexicans are poor tippers. Now, Fernando does not shy away and boldly reminds Edgar that he's talking to a Mexican. This is where there's a twist. Edgar responds by stating that he too is Mexican. What did you want people to take from that scene?
You know, that's very, very important, because I feel like I was actually thinking about this today earlier about like, I feel like there's a lot that when we come to this country, there's a lot that we learn in the restaurant industry that we shouldn't learn. And I feel like that's where most of our immigrant community learns how to become anti-Black, racism, you know, we are put against each other in our community, and we start playing these stereotypes and generalization about our own people. And that's a conversation that happens in that's one issue that happens in all the restaurants, right? Even me, myself, before working in restaurants, I didn't know the tipping culture, the right percentage of tipping, right? And I feel like I learned that. So for me, when I was writing about that, I wanted to bring that conversation, and I want to put it out there, because these are conversations that happens every day in restaurants. I have seen myself when like coworkers come to me and they're like, oh, you know what? My table 7 didn't tip. And you know why? Because they were Mexicans. And for me, it was like, we need to learn from this. So I wanted to raise that awareness in that scene.
And you were talking a little bit about microaggressions earlier from the white customer. And so what we're also seeing is that there's microaggressions even from gente, right? From Latinos who speak English, or Chicanos, or even, you know, people who have grown up here, were born in other countries, who use language and culture as a way to afflict pain, or, like you said, start creating some of these unfair narratives. And so have you had any response to those scenes by other people? And if so, what is that like to them?
You know what? I feel like I'm gonna call out people right now, which I shouldn't, but it's interesting that people that I know that work in restaurants, they don't talk about that scene. They don't talk about the scene of the tipping because they're still thinking like that. They're still thinking like, oh, Mexicans don't tip, Black people don't tip, people of color don't tip, and that is real. And whoever gets offended right now by watching this, they're wrong because they know that this, until today, it's happening. I feel like that's why I wanted to bring it up. Why? Because when I came to this country 18 years old, they were teaching me that, but then I learned that that was not okay. So I wanted to pass the same message to the people with this series, as the same way that I'm doing with other issues that I'm talking about, not only the restaurant industry, but also like the undocumented and LGBT community. But in this case, with these scenes, I wanted to prove that even Edgar or other characters, not because you're undocumented or queer, that doesn't mean that you cannot be, against other oppressed community.
I think that those opening scenes really set the tone for the rest of the season. And in fact, I would say that tone carries through season 2 and season 3. And I think right away we start seeing that Fernando is really taking in the interactions he's having with people. And it really is, you see the way he responds with having to work through his own process. And through Fernando, I think that there's an opportunity to really see that there is an opportunity to question these microaggressions, and that it's okay to do that. That in fact, we should be questioning those sort of comments, which, you and I spoke before in 2017, and back then I asked you about some of the characters and why some spoke Spanish all the time and some only responded in English. And we see this dynamic play out through the series. You shared that you wanted to make sure that you reflect your personal interactions with relationships and your own friends. And that includes, quick code switching, or what we also know as Spanglish. Can you tell us a little bit about why you made that decision?
When I write, I also learned that when I'm writing Undocumented Tales, the 3 seasons, I don't think about that. I don't think about I think there's been just a few scenes where I'm like, for example, the boyfriend in the first season who breaks up with Fernando in the car scene.
Oh, yes.
On that, yes, I did it intentionally. Like, he speaks English. We can clearly see that he speaks or understands Spanish because Fernando speaks Spanish. But I want to see that he just doesn't want to talk Spanish. He understands. That scene was written specifically on Fernando's going to speak Spanish, and there were more about that. We can assume that the character just doesn't feel comfortable talking Spanish. Most of the time on the entire 3 seasons, I just write and it flows. Fluye. I don't know how to say fluye.
Flows. Fluye is flows, ¿verdad?
Yes. It flows, the English, the Spanish, and then also another thing, casting is very important because when I'm writing the Spanish and English, code switching Spanglish scenes, I know that I'm casting talent, actors, actresses that speak both languages most of the time. Unless I speak characters that don't speak English in the story, I also cast people that don't speak English in real life. So I really don't think, because people were mentioning me that there's a lot more Spanish in season 3. And to be honest, when people mentioned that, I was like, like I didn't even notice that there was a lot more Spanish in season 3. And so I don't think about that because I feel like 50% of this is based on my life, and because of that is taking the same language, English, Spanish, and code switching, that it's part of the circle that I mostly belong to.
And I think many of us grew up hearing this, sort of flow either in our homes or in our personal friendships, like you mentioned. And, I want to let you know that one of the tweets that I saw was by Culture Strike, tweeted, Armando Ibañez DocuTales is the docu-queer representation that we need right now, with realistic and imperfect characters. His storylines take us through the highs and lows of a queer immigrant, self-determination in a world that delegitimizes our existence. Sorry, I don't have my glasses on and I have them right here. Look, I should be wearing these. So how much of you is Fernando?
I would say, the essence, is there, but let me tell you that, I would say like 50% of Fernando, it's me, it's based on me. Many of the situations I have lived them. I haven't experienced them, some of the situations, but the way that Fernando reacts and the way that Fernando goes through life during these 3 seasons, that I can tell that is the same essence that I have. I think that Fernando, it's a little messy. I think he's trying to find his voice, because we see him in the closet with his family. We see him kind of like coming out of the shadows, trying to embrace his identity. I feel like he needs he needs a community. He hasn't found it in season 1. Season 2, he's about to find it. And I think that happened to me. And because I felt like I was finding my own voice when I started meeting the undocumented queer community, I felt like I finally belonged somewhere. I feel like I wanted to show that. And that is one thing that I am making sure to put in the series. Regardless of the experiences of each scene, I want to make sure that people know that Fernando is finding his own voice through all the experiences and people that he's meeting. Just like, sorry.
No, after you.
Yes, no, that was it.
There are parts, are there parts in the show where Fernando gets to say something that you wish you would have said? I don't know. I think that Fernando in the first 2 seasons, he's a little scared. I have met undocumented friends who are very unapologetic, very spoken. That comes with personality. I feel like me and Fernando, we have always been afraid of besides the undocumented identity, we have always been afraid of living. And I feel like Fernando, it's very cautious when all the situations. And I feel like most of the time, just like Fernando, most of the time I felt like I was always quiet. One thing that I had to say is that on season 3, there's a hot dog fire scene that it was based on a real story that I went through outside Arena. Remember Arena? Oh yeah.
Outside Arena, we were enjoying our hot dogs with one of my friends. And there were these guys who were buying the hot dog, and they didn't want to pay the street vendor for the hot dogs because she didn't have ketchup. So of course, I was mad, but I was also drunk. And and I was upset because they didn't want to pay. So they didn't want to pay the lady because she didn't have ketchup, and they were playing jerks. And so of course I had to, like, me and my friend, we stood up. And I think that's one of the moments where I knew I had growth, because most of the time, and I would say most of my life, I was always afraid to speak up. And I feel like that's one of the moments, regardless if I was tipsy or not, I think that was the moments that I felt proud about myself, because I've been able to lose that fear of speaking out about injustices. And I think that also I learned that Undocumented Tales, it's my voice to speak up about injustices.
I think that's a scene that I've seen with other people. The first time I saw that scene in season 3, the hot dog scene, was with my husband, and both of us, were like, yeah, you tell him, and then the second time we were actually with you at a quick fundraiser at Casa Azul, and that's when we all saw it, and you saw all our reaction. We were all cheering for Fernando for having spoken up, and I think mainly because we all have seen that moment before. Maybe not about a hot dog, but maybe about the person who's selling. When I was coming out, there was always the Rosas lady, we would call her, and the Rosas lady ended up becoming infamous, and we would see her on different shows. But similarly, I remember seeing that attitude towards her, where sometimes. And in West Hollywood, you would have these customers who would say, oh, well, give me one free, give me one rose for free. I paid $5. And, so it was one of those moments. I think that even if somebody hasn't watched the show and they were just to watch that scene alone, I think they would get a good essence of what to expect from Undocumented Tales. In season 1 of Undocumented Tales, the show is described as a web series about the secret life of a Mexican server in LA. Fernando has secrets, and he is an undocumented immigrant, and he is a closeted gay. He is constantly lying about his legal status and real identity. Tell us what has influenced the development of how you now describe Fernando and the show to people.
You mean like, okay, yeah, I feel like, yes, the way it's evolving, because now I have completed more seasons, I would say now I describe it as the life of an undocumented queer immigrant who's trying to find his voice, his own voice and his own identity. Because as you saw in season 3, Fernando did a huge, how would you say, growth. He grew a lot, I felt, and people have said that they were not expecting to see a lot of the things that they saw on season 3, but I feel like it's important to see that the character, imagine, I didn't have shows to watch about queer characters, when I was a kid. The only thing that I had is tios, uncles, primos, machismo all over, telling me like, don't be queer, no seas puto, no seas maricón. So I feel like seeing, someone who's, regardless of being queer, he's just messy and trying to find his voice and how to navigate life in general. I feel like it's important. So because of that, now with these 3 seasons, I'm like really learning that Fernando, more than just an undocumented immigrant, he's just trying to find his voice and his place in the world.
One of the things that you do a really good job at, you do a good job at many things, right? But one of the things that we'll see consistently happen is that you use Fernando's dating experiences to convey specific messages, specifically about his growth. So Fernando in season 2, during a negotiation of how many mimosas he would order, we learned that his love interest of that moment, Mario is somebody that he's interested in, and they go out to eat, and Mario decides to order some mimosas. And during that conversation, we see that Fernando's uncomfortable to order a drink. And it's when we learn that Mario is a DACA recipient, right? Because he learns from Fernando that the reason he was afraid to order a drink is because he doesn't have papers and his ID is from Mexico. We see many more characters in the series with DACA statuses. Mario says that he's technically undocumented too. And in many occasions, we see that Fernando doesn't necessarily feel that to be true. Walk us through your writing process. Who is this important to? Why do you want audiences to know about DACA characters and how Fernando sometimes feels separated from the DACA characters' experience?
You know, that's one of the most important things of this series, because I feel like, unfortunately, ourselves, people who came out as undocumented, we created the good immigrant narrative too. You know, we were part of this. We were advocating for, like, I speak English, I go to school, you know, and unconsciously, we didn't know we were throwing under the bus many other people. I did that mistake myself. So for me, I wanted to create a different narrative where we see Fernando meeting someone who's DACA, but at the end they have different experiences. And who is the lead character of this series? Someone who is not DACA, right? So somehow we get to see Mario, someone who can understand Fernando's struggles, and because of that, there is this connection, personal connection between the two of them, or maybe I would say from Fernando to Mario. I still want to show that there's a lot more characters out there, and beside or under the label undocumented. Under the label undocumented, there's a lot more characters. We get to see people on the show who are asking for asylum, in DACA, non-DACA. We get to see a character who has been deported. So for me, is to show all of these different characters who have different struggles, so we can get rid of that generalization, especially for audiences who are new to the undocumented issues. And that's why for me it was important to show that he's DACA. And then we also get to see that Fernando, he's not DACA, and he doesn't qualify for college. He hasn't qualified for AB 540, which is the bill for undocumented students in California. So for me, it was very important to show the different levels and access that people with DACA or without DACA have in the series in real life.
You know, I want to ask you to take us to a place of your own personal place of having to be the recipient of a lot of the messages and how that may impact you, because it's definitely had an influence on how you write your characters and the messages that you want to put through. In an interview with Q Voices News earlier this year, you said, during the summer, I quote, "During the summer of 2015, I went through a depression. I used to wake up every day thinking, can this be my life? I'm always going to be hiding. Am I always going to be hiding and lying to my family and to society? I see no point in living like this. I started having suicide thoughts for being an undocumented queer. I was living my normal life, but deep inside, nothing made sense." End of quote. Tell us a little bit about that. You know, so this was before the show. This was before Undocumented Tales. What was that period like, and was Undocumented Tales your outlet?
You know, yes, that was during 2015 summer. I felt like, in my case, in my personal experiences, sometimes being undocumented, you know, it's sometimes I feel like I cannot get up from bed, and some other days I feel like I want to change the world. And during that, one of those bad stages in my life, I went through this depression in 2015, where I just felt like hopeless. I just felt like life didn't make sense. Like I was gonna be struggling with acceptance, and I just didn't have any appetite for life. And I remember I was thinking in my room. I was thinking, like, what's the point? Like, what's the point of being alive? Like, what am I doing here? And I feel really sad for that, Armando, because what can happen for you to get to that point, right? I blame society, hate, intolerance, ignorance. Fortunately, I didn't give up, but also there were many resources around me. And sometimes the universe, God, put things in front of you for you. They send you signs, right? For me, I remember that during that time, I started looking for professional help. I was going to college, and through college, I found professional help. And I remember I was still debating to write, but I didn't know what to write about. And I remember my therapist said, like, you should write about it. And I felt so uninspired. I was like, I don't know what to write about. I don't see this as a therapy. I don't know if writing can be a therapy for me. And then I started watching a YouTube series by Issa Rae called The Misadventures of Awkward Black Girl. And when I watched that series, I was speechless because that changed completely my life. I was like, oh my God, I now know how to write. I know what to write about. I felt so inspired by her work that I knew I had to write about the life of an undocumented queer immigrant. And I also knew that I didn't have to wait for the studios to buy my projects and to create art. I realized that I didn't need the studios to create art. And that's how the journey of Undocumented Tales started.
I appreciate you opening up and sharing that with us. I think, you know, it's an important message for people to really grasp that you know, you saw another web series. You were in the process of finding inspiration. You found that, and you also found a new voice in Fernando. And in many ways, you've given many more people a similar experience. And so, you know, the series takes us from seeing Fernando struggle in season 1 to keep his job after his boss learns that his social security is not valid, to seeing him go through relationship struggles. Season 3 starts with an intimate scene where Fernando's crying into the camera, while a song Breathe by Corina Seas is playing in the background. We then transition into the master shot where we see that Fernando is sitting facing a therapist who's played by Areli Araniva. Placed behind Araniva's character, we see a small trans pride flag on top of a piece of furniture. Talk to me about what it was like to write and produce the opening scene for season 3.
You know, that scene, well, first of all, the therapy scenes were the hardest one for everything, for, you know, the heavy personal themes that we're talking on each scene, but also like technical. For me, they were really hard. It was a whole preparation. I had to consult with a group of therapists, psychosocial therapists in San Francisco, shout out to them. And I felt like the planning of that scene, the opening the scene, I think it was actually the last one. It was the last one. We shot, I believe, 6 therapy scenes. I don't know if there's 6, 5 or 6, 6, I think. That shot, we shot all the therapy scenes, and that was the last one. So we shot all of the first ones, and then that was the last one. Because I remember that people were like kind of joking around, like telling the cinematographer Silvia Lara, this is the first shot, this is the opening shot, no pressure, no pressure. And it was that opening shot. I really wanted. We knew that was the only shot where Fernando was going to be looking at the camera, straight at the camera. And also Fernando was going to break down right in front of the camera. And I just couldn't do it because I cried during every therapy scene. And I cried so much during every take that at some point I couldn't cry no more. Like there were no tears inside me no more because I was just crying the entire morning for all the therapy scenes. So I didn't cry, so we just did what we could. And I wanted to show the people that this is what season 3 is gonna be about. Season 3, it's going to be about mental health. We need to find resources somehow. And I know that the undocumented community does not have a lot of resources to actually, people of color don't have a lot of resources, especially because I just read an article this morning that I believe 5% of professional therapists, from all of them, only 5% are people of color. So there's a lot of problems with that. But I did wanted to somehow tell my people, let's look for help. We need to talk about all of our experiences, you know, and not necessarily only like traumatic experiences, but also like we can just go to talk, not necessarily about like something sad. And I wanted people to know that that was going to be my statement on season 3, mental health and look for help.
It's definitely that opening scene set the tone for season 3. And I did see that in your credits, you let people know that you set out a mental health consultant group, and you mentioned psychosocial media. I didn't realize they were in San Francisco. How did you find them?
One of them watched the series season 2. Then I met them and I emailed them, and they were so generous to help me with the scenes. I consulted with them with the scenes, and they also helped me to consult with the actress Arelia Araniva. So I wanted to make sure that we were on point with the scenes. But mostly we don't see a lot from the therapists. We see more about Fernando, you know,
Right.
Because I wanted to make sure that we were gonna hear Fernando talking about what he needed to let it out.
So I was going to move into something, but I also had a thought that the first time I also saw the therapist character, I don't know if the character was intentionally cast to be Afro-Latina, but it was with one of those first moments where I felt, oh, there's an Afro-Latina character on the show, where there was very little said about her specifically, but, you know, I just thought that, you know, in the one character you were able to convey a lot of messaging. One, she was a person of color. She also spoke Spanish. She, you know, we weren't getting the message that, oh, all therapists are white, or all therapists, you know, wear suits and are, you know, so really, I saw a lot of moments there in that one character, although like you said, she didn't have a lot of speaking parts. So here's another tweet from CYC Podcasts. This is the art we want. Queer Latinx leads. We aren't victims. We are just humans existing. Thank you, Docu-Tales, for continuing to speak to us. So, you know, I thought that also 4 years ago, Undocumented Tales was first published on March 20th, 2016. And then the first episode was published 3 months later. In season 2, you had a premiere on November 11, 2017 at the Village at Ed Gould Plaza. That would later receive 5 LA Web Fest nominations. Then in season 3, it premiered on December 15 with the episode title, The Announcement. Why was it important to start season 3 with that title, The Announcement?
Because I really wanted to talk about the announcement that Obama did during that year, which is the DAPA, which was going to be some sort of extension for DACA for parents. And still, I mean, that didn't go into effect. It got blocked, but still, that was not enough. And not even Fernando and the mom qualified for that. But I also wanted to show what happened to us behind the curtain. Yes, we can go to the streets and protest and give an interview and this and that, but what happened to us when we find out about this? What happened to us in our houses? when we gotta communicate to our parents that, you know, there's gonna be a new announcement and we're not part of it, and that we're still not being recognized as human beings by this country. So when when I started writing this Undocumented Tales, I started writing an outline for 5 seasons. So I already have the outline for season 4 and season 5, if there's a season 4 and season 5. But I did wanted to talk about that because I wanted to let it out of my chest. I wanted to tell people, like, look, this is what we went through 4 years ago, and we're going through this every day of our lives. I get to show characters who have this hope when they shouldn't be struggling to dream about this. They shouldn't be struggling to be recognized as human beings. So I know that the main message of the first episode of season 3 was going to be the announcement, to show that despite the message, despite not being able to qualify for a better life, he was gonna keep going. And I feel like my message he's gonna keep going is the last scene of the episode, when he starts, he has his heart broken, he's devastated, he's defeated, but yet he grabs the phone and he starts calling his friends and telling, you do qualify, you do qualify. So I thought that was my my way to show that regardless, I'm still running for whoever can have a better life. I'm not gonna be part of this, but my friend and my cousin and whoever, they're gonna be part of this.
That was goodness. I have to say that was a very challenging moment for me to watch. I have had to work to inspire, you know, friends and family members just to vote. So for me, it was an insightful moment where you really took me to a place I've never thought about before, and I have to be honest with you about that. When Eva, Fernando's mom is asking him, you know, about what she's seen on TV or what news is, that also broke my heart when Fernando's having to respond to her, and to think what that must be like to be sort of the steward of information for a parent that may not necessarily have access to the information or may not understand all the full details. And even if they do understand, the having to make this a moment that is a little less painful, because as a son, that's what you see that Fernando wants to do. He doesn't want to hurt his mom to hurt. And then what, like you mentioned, what we then see Fernando do is call his friends who may not be aware of the information that they do qualify, right? That they do qualify. I want to talk about a little bit about the grant from Immigrant Rising. This grant helped you assemble the kind of main crew that you want to see. To be specific, I'm referring to LGBTQ filmmakers. I hear that you estimated that about 80% of your crew is LGBTQ. Why is that important to you? And I include, you know, we'll leave it at that. Let's start there. Why is that important to you?
It's important because we need those changes. We need to support each other. And for me, I felt very lost when I was going to college for film school, because I felt like I couldn't fit myself. I couldn't find my circles. So, they're telling me we need to wrap up soon.
Really?
Yes. I think you're watching the screen.
Oh, okay.
So yeah, so it's very important because we need to support each other so we can keep encouraging all our communities that we are alive, that we are powerful, that we are strong, and that if someone wants a chance, someone wants an opportunity to open more doors, the other one has to do the same. And if I have another opportunity, I need to bring my people with me. So for me, also, to make sure that my crew it's going to be able to do the same things that I am doing.
You know, I want to make sure I get some of these conversations in here. So I'm going to put Undocumented Tales aside for a quick moment. You have a new documentary that's not out necessarily. Let's talk about that for a moment. The name of it is Before and After Detention. It's a documentary directed and edited by you. And it follows the lives of Gladys, Fernanda, and Angela. Can we talk a little bit about this documentary?
Yes, that's a short documentary that follows the life of three trans women. One comes from Mexico, one from Guatemala, and one from El Salvador. And they are telling us their experience and the reason why they came to the US pursuing a better life like many of us, but because of the transphobia and violence that they face, their journey, it's a lot different even when they get to the United States, because once they get here, even if their asylum case gets approved, they still face the transphobia in the United States. But I wanted to tell this story from their point of views. So changing a little bit the typical narrative that many people have done of the victim. You know, these are three powerful, beautiful women who also have goals and dreams, and I wanted to make sure to put that in the documentary. So hopefully we get to premiere it probably next month in the Undocumented Tales YouTube channel. So stay tuned.
Okay. So let's also talk a little bit about your involvement with Plain Sight earlier this month.
Plain Sight, it's an art installation or art project that they, Rafa Esparza and Casillas, two artists, they put together this art project where during the 4th of July, this past 4th of July, they put 80 artists who created messages, and these messages were put on the sky on top of the detention centers to send messages to the government and also to the people in detention centers, do not give up, and also to demand that detention centers shouldn't exist, that people cannot be in detention no more, and people should not be getting deported. So I was blessed to be invited to be part of this art and message project that happened during this 4th of July.
You also recently shared your coming out story in a video produced by Define American. You talk about what it was like to come out to your mom and what it was like to date guys who are not undocumented. Did it feel different to share this narrative as Armando and not as Fernando in that project?
A little. I think you're talking about a video I did like way before Undocumented Tales.
It's with Define American.
I did it like before Undocumented Tales. So I think they reshare it.
Oh, is that what happened? So recently it was reshared because you spoke about what it was like to come out and have to tell your mom and that.
Yes, that video.
That story, yeah. So was that a little different? Was the coming out experience a little different being in first person versus a character?
Yes, it was definitely different. I felt like I needed to know a lot, and I needed to understand more about my coming out experience. Now, 4 or 5 years later, I feel like I can talk more about my coming out experience. I don't think, I remember I was crying during that video because I was still dealing with coming out to my family. So I definitely feel a lot different now.
Another tweet that I read was by Chucha_Marquez, OMFG, laughing my ass off. Sorry, excuse me. So many quotables in the new season of Undocumented Tales. So let's talk about some of these quotes. A quote from Alejandra's character in season 2, episode 6, Adios Fed, you gotta be the Jota you wanna see in the world. You even have a shirt with the quote printed. I have it right here. So do you have people coming to you and throwing quotes at you all the time?
No, but some people do quote that quote. Like they talk about like, you gotta be the hottest you gotta see in the world. So the salsa, is it green or red sauce? Cilantro no bueno. People do say things like that. Here and then, sometimes I don't really instantly cut the quotes. Sometimes they're like, oh, it's from the YouTube. I'm like, oh, that's true. Yes, here and then people do throw some quotes from the episodes, and that makes me feel happy.
You cast trans people to play trans characters. We all love Alejandra, who's played by Mia. How do you say the last name? Peñalosa. Peñalosa. And Jessica, who's played by Mariana Marroquin. How did you decide to make sure to bring trans characters to this particular story?
Well, because the character Alejandra was inspired by an undocumented trans powerful woman who was unfortunately murdered. And that was inspired by someone from a real person. And then Jessica, because at that point I had friends who were trans and they were coming asking for asylum, that I wanted to write about that experience, because that experience is way different than my experience. So I wanted to incorporate that. But also on season 3, I wanted to bring at season 3, I was just like, this doesn't need to be about like, this has to be trans. And that's why Anel Jacobo Pulido auditioned for a immigration lawyer. And she just got the part because she was amazing in it, right? And then I'm also myself learning that, you know, the power that I have to use my privilege to also break barriers and not necessarily give this character to someone who has to be trans or specifically has to talk about trans experiences, right? Like the immigration lawyer. So for me, I'm also learning about this, and I feel like I also feel like I have to continue educating myself and in order to bring better representation of underrepresented communities. We need to wrap up, unfortunately.
Okay, so okay. I just want to say that it's been a pleasure to watch you on the show blossom. You you do not stand under anyone else's shadow, and bravo, Armando, for everything that you're doing. Gracias.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you for supporting the show. I'm very glad that you liked it, and thank you to all the community, to all the people who were part of every season, all supporters, volunteers, the talent, the crew. I have no words to describe the amount of love and support from everyone who has been contributing to the making of these 3 seasons. I don't know what's going to happen, to be honest, but I'm going to fight really hard to make a season 4.
Well, thank you so much, Javier and Armando. My apologies to Facebook viewers. We were not able to connect, do the regular streaming. So as you see, I'm using my cell phone to do my shaky cell phone to do the live stream, but hopefully you can view the entire recording. We'll be posting it on our YouTube page at La Plaza LA, also on our Facebook page at La Plaza LA, and also at laplazala.org, the entire conversation, which was recorded on Zoom. So thank you so much. This was very enlightening. Tell us, Armando, where can people